Okay. Okay, friends, uh, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends, I have the great pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of the Association of Eronica in Australasia. Um, and before we begin, I usually pay a tribute and also acknowledge the indigenous people of Australasia and also global around the world. And they are the original owners of these lands, and we uh, pay our tribute to them at this stage. Um, Before opening this lecture series, to give you a little background about the Association of Eronica in Australasia, it was established in 2004 in Sydney, and we had quite a number of conferences with many prestigious guests and also the cultural events that we organized at the time. And also, we were uh, able to invite the speakers from around the globe, you know. But then when the COVID happened, we were somehow limited, but at the same time, we didn't give up and we continued our activities in form of virtual lectures that we have continued to this date. And we are, today we have the fifth lecture in the series of 2025 AIA virtual lecture series. Um, and it is quite interesting topic from the point of view of an area of history of Iran that has been basically overlooked or neglected deliberately by, of course, the state and also the clerical machination, and as a result, many of these research activities and historical accounts of what happened, the impact of the Bábi movement in Iran has been basically neglected in the education system and the whole lot. Whereas the when we notice that, and of course, I'm sure our guest speaker will elaborate on that, that the social impact of this movement was phenomenal, and it was completely a kind of revolutionize the social order of the time in Iran. And it has continued the implication of that, which was global teaching of the Bab, was a universal thing which has really progressed globally. But lamentably, it has been oppressed, in the country of its origin. However, we move on to I briefly introduced our speaker, and our speaker today is Professor Boris Handel, who is currently a professor of education with expertise in digital learning technologies, and he, at the moment or present time, based at the School of Education of the University of Notre Dame in Sydney, Australia. And his academic background is wonderful and so varied and diverse. And in his professional career, he has worked in the field of educational curriculum development, and he has also taught at universities and schools around Australia, Asia, and Latin America. And from 1980s onward, he has written over about 100 academic journals, articles, and also published quite a number of books, both on the field of education, as well as his personal and extracurriculum scholarship. And he has been teaching in Australia and New Zealand. Uh, and in the field of the publications, there are many, and we have put a couple of them, the more recent ones, on this poster that you have noticed. Um, and especially his attention has been on the history of Iran in the 19th century. Um, and the focus has been on the early Bábi movement in Iran. Um, and also we have pleasure to have our discussant, Dr. Sarush Sadaqat, uh, who will be introducing the theme of the topic before Professor Boris Handel, deliver his talk. Dr. Sadaqat has got a Bachelor of Education from University of Shiraz or Pahlavi University, and also he has followed his academic education and acquiring a Master of Science from University of Western Sydney and his PhD from the University of Technology in Sydney. And he has held several executive roles with the Australian industries and has also served as instructor at the University of Notre Dame in Sydney. In addition to these professional skills, Dr. Sadaqat has been a great translator and has been engaged in translating quite a number of publications, including some of Professor Handel's publications. So without further ado, I pass it on to our presenters, and I welcome you all to join us in this wonderful and exciting topic. Thank you. Suruchan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Roshan, for your kind introduction. My warmest greetings and welcome to each and all of you across Australasia and other locations for attending this virtual lecture. Also, I extend our warmest welcome to Professor Boris Handel, our speaker for tonight, enlightening us with his accurate and valuable historical talk. I would like to sincerely thank the Association of Iranica in Australasia and Professor Handel for invitation to join as a discussant for tonight's talk. In particular, I convey my thanks and deep appreciation to the Association for providing this valuable space focused on promoting the rich culture and heritage of Iran, which are rooted in religious beliefs and spirituality, art and literature, family and social values, tradition and festivals, and the complex system of hospitality, embracing self-sacrifice, generosity, and food. These important cultural elements have collectively assisted us to develop our national identity and celebrate our oneness, unity, love, and care for each other, promoting equitable opportunities as well as through social cohesion, fostering a shared sense of belonging and willingness to harmoniously and free from biases work together for the collective good. I have had the privilege of having known Professor Handel for nearly 2.5 decades. working on research, publication, and community building activities. Professor Boris Handel is originally from South America, a Peruvian Australian Baha'i who has embraced the faith through independent investigation. He currently lives in Sydney with his Persian wife Parvin Khanum. Professor Handel's impressive interest in Persian had led him to formally pursue writing and speaking the language. Professor Handel stands as a contemporary scholar whose multilingual scholarship, richly detailed biographies, and comparative textual research work bridge education, historiography, and the study of Eastern religious traditions. Although widely recognized for his long academic career in mathematics education, digital education delivery, and learning technologies, Professor Handel has also emerged as a distinguished author in the modern re-examination of Orientalism. His approach, humanistic, textually grounded, and interculturally sensitive, contributes to the major intellectual shift occurring in the field away from colonial era biases toward an emphasis on authenticity, spirituality, and cross-cultural dialogue, ensuring that the voices and experiences of East are understood accurately, respectfully, and with a profound sense of human interconnectedness. Professor Handel has published several books and articles on the 19th century Persian culture, Islam, Bábism, and the Baha'i faith. His work has been translated into 5 languages, including Persian. Boris has a background in tertiary and school education, having taught in Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Australasia. He also completed postgraduate studies at Sydney and Edith Cowan University. Professor Handel is currently a professor of education at University of Notre Dame, Australia, and has written over 100 academic publications. Tonight, Professor Handel will present authentic historical insight on the Bábi Massacre of 1849, the root cause of this unfortunate event, which created a dark chapter in our Persian history, were deeply embedded and influenced by the political and religious intolerance of the time. History, as is its role, empowers us to further develop our critical thinking, research ability, and general awareness for developing a brighter future away from misinformation, misunderstanding, intolerance, and the forces of division. The massacre of the 10th of May, 1849, near the village of Afra in the province of Mazandaran, marked the tragic and defining climax of the 7-month siege of the Bábi stronghold at Sheikh Tabarsi, one of the earliest and most dramatic episodes of the Bábi period. For months, several hundred Bábi defenders, many of them young and untrained, had withstood repeated assaults by vastly superior royal forces, enduring acute hunger, exposure, having no protection from harm, disease, and near constant shelling. By early May, weakened and still unbroken, they were offered terms of amnesty and safe passage by the command of Qajar Prince Mehdi Qoli Mirza, allegedly sanctioned by the highest clerical authorities. Trusting in these guarantees, the Bábis exited their entrenchments to negotiate. The promises, however, were a calculated deception. The moment they laid down their arms, the government troops encircled and seized them. Hundreds were brutally slain on the spot, and the wounded were executed in cold blood. Survivors attempting to flee were surrounded, were pursued and killed in the nearly forests and fields. This deliberate act of betrayal of trust not only extinguished one of the earliest organized Bábi centers, but also had enduring repercussion lasting over a period of time. If hundreds, it hardens a state policy against the emerging Baha'i movement, emboldened the ecclesiastical establishment in its calls for suppression, and shaped public opinion, contributing to decades of fear, hostility, and recurrent persecution throughout Iran. So now I would like, without any further ado, invite Professor Handel for presenting his valuable talk. But I would like also to make a request that if possible, please hold on to your questions and queries to the time of question and answer, which will be shortly after the talk. And please don't, write them in the chat, which could be distracting to our presenter. Nevertheless, if you would like, to forward your questions in a private chat to me, I would be very happy to receive them, and at the end of the talk, share it with Professor Handel. And also, please make sure the questions are related to the presented topics, clear and concise, so that they are not open type or open-ended type questions for efficacy and providing a convincing answer to you. So please, Professor Handel, I welcome you to the stage, and time is yours for presenting your valuable talk to us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Dr. Siragat, for your kind words, and also Mr. Roshan for this beautiful introduction. These are very kind, it's a very kind introduction. They give me a lot of encouragement to render a good presentation. Starting with the topic today, if I can share the screen now. Okay, here we are. It's about the massacre of Bábis in 1849 in the province of Mazandaran. The conflict was called the conflict of Sheikh Tabarsi, which took about 8 months, resulted in approximately 1,500 deaths. Nearly 1/3 of them were Bábis. And this event marked an important turning point in the development of the Babism in Iran. This is the topics that I am going to discuss in this presentation. This presentation will go for around 50 minutes. I have put some small video clips that you can see something more dynamic information. So first of all, I am going to talk about the world in 1800, 1850, including Iran. I'll give a brief introduction to Babism, and then I will talk about the history of Babism leading to the massacre, and then misperceptions about Babism. I feel that I have to spend a bit of time giving you a background on the contradictions in the Iranian society and the causes that preceding and the events preceding the massacre of Sheikh Tabarsi, so you have understanding, a deeper understanding of what these events took place, which are very complex in a way. So the world in 1800, 1850s in Iran, in the world, starting from the world, we see that the world is transitioning from the 18th century to the 19th century through a path from the Enlightenment era to the Industrial Revolution, two important eras in the history of humanity. The Enlightenment era, ending at the end of the 18th century, say 1700s, is a era, is a epoch where humanity was very much into knowledge, into sciences, into reason, was a strong emphasis on religious tolerance, secularism, constitutional monarchies, independence, freedoms, liberties. It was sort of a wake of humanity into the world. And on the other side, we got the Industrial Revolution, which was a time where humanity started, as a consequence of the Enlightenment era, to develop heavy machinery, which was about to supply, was going to take a lot of labor, but was expanding through, especially throughout the cities. In between, there were three main revolutions: the American Independence Revolution, which was a turning point in the history of humanity because it was the first republic in the West that was formed against a strong power, imperial power, Britain. And in turn, this American independence affected the Europe, enacting the French Revolution, which was the beginning of a sequence of revolutions in Europe, leading to the fall of several dynasties. And finally, we got the Haitian slave revolution in 1804, where was very significant because it was the first Black revolution that led to the establishment of the first Black republic in 1804 in Latin America. And it made a strong impact on the way people were looking at this slavery trade. Start thinking about abolition of slavery. So in this half a century, there were an explosion of events in human history: the locomotive, the telegraph, the first electric battery, vaccinations, introduction of vaccination, STEM power, photographic cameras, stethoscopes, typing machines, the first comprehensive view about the atomic structure, and also electromagnetism. So there were signs that things were changing in humanity very quickly during this first half of the century. And you can see here some of the revolutions that started taking place in the first half of the century in Europe as a consequence of first the French Revolution and before the American Revolution. Some of the dynasties eventually were abolished, and they gave way to new republics in Europe. So what happened in Iran at the same time? This way of liberalism opening that caused the era of enlightenment was traveling from west to east through Europe in direction to the Middle East. So this emphasis to individual liberties, religious tolerance, constitutional monarchy start spreading through Europe to the east. It reached the Ottoman Empire. Therefore, the Ottoman Empire collapsed, eventually became a republic, and was traveling next to Iran, which was a sort of close country. Now, talking about Iran, according to these words of Abdul Baha, Iran was in the time of the Achaemenids and the other dynasties in Iran, time of Cyrus the Great, was the largest empire that the world have ever seen, the Persian Empire, based on Zoroastrian religion. The description that we see here is that Iran was the fairest of lands, was once a lamp streaming with the rise of divine knowledge, of science and art, of nobility and higher achievement, of wisdom and valor. Today, Apollo has said, because of the idleness and lethargy of her people, their torpor, their undisciplined way of life, their lack of pride, lack of ambition, her bright fortune has been totally eclipsed. Her light has turned to darkness. So Iran was a land of corruption, government corruption, and religious intolerance. Religious intolerance and also rejection to whatever came from the West. The West, the Christian world was seen as an impure civilization that the Islamic dominion shouldn't be in contact with them. It's also meant that the three main religions that happened at that time were establishing at the time, the Jewish, the Zoroastrian, and the Christian religions, say the non-Muslim religions, were seen as najis, impure, untouchable, meaning that you shake hands with one of these members of these communities, you have to wash your hands because they were ritually, they were unclean. And therefore, there was a lot of rejection about approaching these communities and approaching the West. There was a sort of religious monopoly. Anything outside the customary religion of that time were seen as heretics. There was a Shah, the Muhammad Shah, the Sir Gayar, that used to be called himself Shahanshah, means king of kings. But at that time, the area of Iran has really shrunk and was not anymore the big empire that used to be. In these circumstances is when Babism appeared in Iran and was founded by the Bab, who announced the dawn of a new revelation and the imminent spiritual rebirth of mankind. And he also drew attention to the imminent appearance of a messenger of God bearing a new revelation for the people. So the Bab founded his faith in 1844. Her missions lasted only 6 years, but were very intense years of persecutions and growth. However, the Bab was imprisoned in the mountains of Azerbaijan for several years. So, and he couldn't be in contact with his believers. So when the Bab came, he causes an uproar in the establishment for three main things. First of all, he called himself the Gate of God, but he also, because the Bab means in Arabic the gate, but he also proclaimed to be the long-awaited Qaim, who shall arise, who was the promised one of Islam. So the Qaim was an expected divine messenger, especially in Islam Shia, that the people have been waiting for over 1 year, and they were praying for the coming of this Qaim, that he will make the world more just. The second reason of rejection to the persecution to the cause of the Bab is that he inaugurated a new independent religion and broke away from Islam, meaning that the Babism was not a sect of Islam, was a totally independent religion. The Bab therefore changed the main ordinances, marriage, divorce, prayers, tithe, fasting, inheritance, and many other religious observances that were in the Quran were changed to a new format. And the third reason that the religion of the Bab was persecuted was because the Bab taught that the prophecies and teachings from previous holy books, Quran, the New Testament, the Old Testament, and the Avesta from the Zoroastrians, was more symbolic than literal. So he challenged the interpretations, the literal, the mechanic interpretation of these prophecies and teachings in topics like resurrection, heaven, and hell. These were not space or time related events, they were spiritual, mystical concepts. The Bab also was made a lot of opposition because he came with a very social progressive agenda. In a world in Iran that was totally in slumber, was not in religious intolerance, the Bab brought new teachings. For example, in economics, he uh, he brought the concept of interest. The concept of interest is forbidden in Islam, charging money for interest. The Bab said it was allowed now. He also changed the unit of weight, measurements, taxes, and other transactional standards. This was really a revolution in Iran. On the arts, the Bab reminds his followers that they should look at the Christians as example of art. Um, this is very important as well because the whole clerical establishment rejected the Christians because they were impure. And they say that we shouldn't look at them because they were najis. On handicraft and industry, the Bab also encouraged his followers to learn from Christians because he said the Christians have attained a high degree of development. About equality, for example, he said the rulers and the farmers, there are just one thing, and they are both equal in the eyes of God. On pursuing knowledge, the Bab encouraged his believers to go overseas, go everywhere, Christian countries, and learn all the knowledge that they had developed. And he even praised the Christians, Europeans, for using the telescope to investigate the universe. Cleanliness was something really that the Bab put emphasis. He put emphasis on clean water, not only for physical benefits, but also for the spiritual purity. So he praised again the Christian nations in terms of the high level of hygiene, in defiance of the country's religious laws that frame Westerners as impure. And he also praised their industry, their commerce, the art, postal services. He mentioned the need to have postal services in Iran, for example, and do commerce with all peoples in all professions. On women, probably that was one of the most important attributes that were praised in Babism, was that the Bab allowed men and women to look at each other and speak and sit together. Means no gender separations, means no chador, no Islamic faith, because that area has gone. As a result, we got people, girls, ladies like Tahereh. You are probably familiar with Tahereh, the great poet of Iran, that took the veil off, and then she was killed because of her behavior, the disposition towards the women to improve the quality of life in women. And before she died in 1852, before she was killed, she said, "You can kill me as soon as you like, but you cannot stop the emancipation of women." On impurity, the Bab removed the concept of spiritual impurity or uncleanness associated with objects and animals in the Old and New Testament and the Quran. So no animals were impure by itself, no objects were impure by itself. What is impure in brackets is what is abhorrent to the mind in terms of moral, in terms of ethics, but nothing inherently is impure. So the Bab said everything has been created again. On hygiene, as well as we talk, the Bab emphasized water. He forbidden the use of public baths in Iran. That at that time were tank waters where people wash themselves, but the water never was changed. So he said that people should bath by putting clean water on the bodies rather than plunging into these tank waters. So these were all very statements that were against establishment. He said, for conversion, but we should convert people through evidence and proof and testimony and certitude. No violence should be used, and people should be treated with kindness. Even he taught the kindness to animals, that we shouldn't overweight beasts with heavy weights, and even put a fine for people who causes grief to another person. The Bab was also very strong to Muhammad Shah, to the king, and he called him unjust king. Very strong remarks showing that he has erred during his reign as a monarch. He also talked about helping the poor. The Bab said that the rich people should share their wealth, because that wealth is from God, towards the poor people of the country. He also prohibited begging in the marketplaces, forbidden to give heed to him who begs. Okay, everyone has to earn a livelihood. To the clerical order, the Bab was very strong, and he said that they should look at his books, at his new teachings, forget about his own manual books that they had about metaphysics and jurisprudence that they had produced. Many of them were based in superstitions, and look toward his cost. Call it obsolete writings that you are reading. On progressive revelation, the Bab taught that there are prophets with revealed books, and there has been as numerous as the creators of the world, and will continue to come. That he was not the last prophet; many will come, and also he mentioned that when a prophet comes, he establishes a covenant where he appoints his successor. So progressive revelation, that is revelation of God, prophets like Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, the Bab, is a change of revelations, and is part of a more extensive process that will never have end, because humanity needs also always spiritual guidance. And of course, he was against violence, and he made a call to human fraternity, that we are all from one tree, and we are leaf and fruit of the same tree, and should be a source of comfort to one another. So it was a religion of kindness. Okay, having said that, what were the teachings of the Bab that were really revolutionary for their time, and they were, for the same reason, they were rejected with violence. Now we have to look at a very important teaching of the Bab about the promised one, the Gaem. At that time in the world, the Christian world was expecting the return of Jesus Christ, and they even put the year 1844, that people then went to the top of the mountains, and people moved to Israel, Palestine, to wait for the coming of Jesus on the Mount Carmel. They were sure that the second return of Jesus Christ was coming in 1844. Some movements like the Adventism were developed during that time. And in parallel, the Islamic world was looking for the Mahdi, or also the Qaim, that was the great awaited leader that would restore justice in the world. So messianic expectations were strong at that time. Particularly in Iran, they were expecting for the Qaim, as I mentioned before, which was called also the Sahib al-Zaman, the Lord of the Age. And who was the Sahib al-Zaman, or the Qaim? He was the 12th Imam, say the 12th descendant of Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, in that line of succession. that the 12th Imam went into occultation in 260 Hijri, calendar Hijri, Islamic calendar. And he said it was thought that he was going to come back in 1,000 years. So, according to some statements from the Quran, so therefore 260 plus 1,000 years is 1,260 years in calendar Islamic, which is 1844, which was the time when the Bab declared his mission. This is one of the quotes from the Quran about the prophecy of the 1,000 years, okay? That in the end, he said the affairs will go up to him for a space of 1,000 years. At the same time, the Quran, talking about the Quran, mentioned the blast of two trumpets, meaning two messengers of God to appear, very similar to the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse of St. John's, where he also mentioned two trumpets, meaning that two messengers will come. The first was the Bab, in the belief of the Bábis, and the second was Baha'u'llah. So in the books of the Bab, he mentioned very often, numerous times, the coming of he whom God shall make manifest. It's from the Arabic, man yadhhiruhu, him who God shall make manifest. Many times he said that the whole purpose of his revelation was the mention, the announcement of the man yadhhiruhu. So therefore, Baha'u'llah appeared in 1863. The Bab was martyred in 1850, and he gathered all the remaining Bábis and infused a new spirit into the community before, and he claimed to be the new manifestation foretold by the Bab. The Bab also created new laws. These new laws signal that that was an independent religion with their own book. Because he said that the religions evolved from one dispensation to the next. For example, Moses prohibited the consumption of pork, but Jesus Christ allowed any type of consumption. Muhammad prohibited, for example, Christians celebrate the day of the week on Sunday, the Jewish on Saturday, the Muslims on Friday, meaning that laws, religious change according to the time and needs of humanity. This was the Bible called the abrogation, that a law is abrogated and a new law is enacted. However, the Bab used three different terms, more beautiful terms. He said that when a new revelation comes up, the old law is changed to a new law, meaning that the process is perfected. The old law is perfected into a new law. That the old law is elevated into a new law. That the old law is consumed into a new law. So rather than use the word abrogation, he used it in the terms of a process of development of the law. And his teachings, his laws, are in this book called the Persian Bayan, what has been translated into French and to English. I think it's available on the internet. So these are the laws that the Bab changed. The changing of this law was enough to be declared a heretic, because no one could change the laws of the Quran, except someone who claimed to be like Muhammad. And the Bab proclaimed to be also a messenger of God at the same level of Muhammad. So the change of laws also caused a lot of grief to the Bab, especially when he changed the calendar. He changed the old Islamic and the Christian calendar for a new calendar called the Badi calendar, which has 19 months of 19 days. Each month has the name of one of the God's attributes, bounty, power, and so on. But when the Bab created his calendar, means he really created a revolution in society, because the calendar was the Islamic calendar was the basis for all religious events throughout the year. For example, the pilgrimage. So when the Bab changed the calendar, everything was changed totally. So therefore, again, the change of these laws caused a lot of rejection on the Bab. And then we can start talking about the history of the massacre of Sheikh Tabarsi. Now that we understand what is it that caused these persecutions. So in the next slide, I'm going to talk about two people here, Mullah Hussein and Qudus, two important people that I will constantly mention. Mullah Hussein was the first disciple of the Bab, the first person who believed in the Bab. It's called the Babul Bab, the gate of the gate. And Qudus was the last of the first contingent of believers. So the first contingent of believers were 18 people, the first 18 people who declared their faith in the Bab in the first 40 years of the declaration, in the following 40 years of the declaration. The first was Mullah Hussein. The last one was Qudus, who was a young person of 22 years. Both of them were students of Sayyid Qasim Rashti in Karbala. Who was Sayyid Qasim Rashti? Sayyid Qasim was a theologian that in turn was follower of Sheikh Ahmad, the founder of Sheikhism in Iran. What was Sheikhism? Sheikhism was a new theology within Iran, if you can call it sort of a sect, where they developed a theology very, in a way, different from the theology of the establishment. And that led to many confrontations between the main clerical establishment and these theories of Shaihism. Because Shaihism has two characteristics. One is that they talk about the Qaim. The Qaim is coming, get ready. Particularly, Sayyid Qasim said to his students, the Qaim is already on earth, go and spread throughout the world and find the Qaim. The Qaim is alive. He said, I don't have any successor. When I die, I want you to disappear from here and find the Qaim. And the second aspect is that they thought that the things mentioned in the holy books, like resurrection, the day of God, they were not literal, they were metaphysical concepts. So therefore, Mullah Hussein and Qudus, they went to the city of Shiraz looking for the Qaim. They went through different cities. They finally reached the city of Shiraz. And Mullah Hussein was the first in declare, he made the Bab, and was the first to declare his faith in the Bab. So this was the first letter of the living. Months later, Qudus, the other disciple, the youngest disciple, went with the Bab to Mecca, from the port of Bushehr to Mecca, which was the sort of the capital of the Islamic world, because there was a prophecy that the Qaim will declare his mission in Mecca. The travel took several times, and when he came back to Iran, through Bushehr, he started from Bushehr to the city of Shiraz. The city of Shiraz is where he used to live. He faced a strong opposition from the Islamic clergy. He was abused. to the point that he had to leave the place. He had to leave Shiraz and going into exile into the city of Esfahan, which was north of Shiraz. In Esfahan, the Bab I want to move. In Isfahan, the Bab was received warmly, and he stayed a few months in the house of the governor of Isfahan. He was actually very attached to the Bab. He recognized the Bab as not only a person of great charm, but a great of knowledge. Such was the sort of the popularity that the Bab spread in the city of Isfahan, that the Shah became very nervous about who is the Bab, what are his intentions, and therefore the Shah ordered the Bab to be taken from Isfahan to him to the city of Tehran, which was the capital of Iran. So he went all the way to from Isfahan. He went to Qom, and then he also went to very close Kashan, and then he went very close to Tehran. However, when he was close to Tehran, he received another message from the Shah. The Shah had changed his mind and had ordered the Bab to go to a prison in the north of the country. The reason why he changed his mind was most likely the influence of the prime minister, who thought that if the Bab met personally the Shah will convert to the face of the Bab. So therefore, what happened is that he was instead sent with a escort just at the doors of Tehran, north to Tabriz, and finally he got to the prison of Maku. So what was the prison of Maku? Was a prison in the north of Iran, very close to the border with Russia. And he stayed from 1847 to 1844, and later he was transferred to another prison. Good. Now, fast forwarding, we go to 1844, middle of the year, when Qutuz and Mullah Hossein, the first and the last letter of the living, were living in Mashhad together, and they were actually promoting the faith of the Bab openly, with a greatly good receptivity that hundreds of people accepted the faith of the Bab, accepted that the Bab was the Qaim, the promised Qaim. And that was in the city of Mashhad. But such a popularity, such a growth made the clerics and the government very apprehensive, and therefore they both were asked to leave the city of Mashhad. So the first to leave was Qutuz, and Qutuz went all the way from Mashhad to his place in Babol. He was a native of Babol. And in the way he stopped in the city, in the town of Badash, where a number of Bábis had gathered together for what was called the Conference of Badash in the middle of 1848. And this conference was critical in the development of Babism because at that time they understood that the teachings of the Bajan, the book of the Bab, were a break from the past. So every day they look at a new law of the Bajan and how it's going to be substituted a law of Islam. So after that event, the Babis understood that this is clearly a new revelation, independent revelation. And also one of the objectives was to go to see the Bab in Chehrik, in the prison of Chehrik, to see how he can be liberated from his confinement there. So there were two purposes there. These are some pictures of the Conference of Badash. Of course, they're not real. But on the left-hand side, you can see that that Istahere is there and is taking his veil off in front of people, which caused such an uproar even among the Bábis, because seeing the face of a woman was something really sinful at that time. Once the Godus finished the Conference of Adach, he was abducted and he was taken to the city of Sari in the north of Iran, the province of Mazandaran, where he was recluded in house arrest in the house of his uncle, a famous Mosayed. At the same time, Mullah Hussein, who was still in Mashhad, he received an order from the Bab, who was in prison, tell him to go to the Green Islands, means the province of Mazindaran, which is a very green area, jungle, and go and help Godus. So the Babis around the country was also asked to go and assist help Godus in the province of Mazandaran. At the same time, we got information, that the Mullah Hussein and his companions, they also planned to travel to the prison of Sherik to meet the Bab. Okay. So there was probably a secondary motive that on the way or after go to the prison in the mountains of Azerbaijan. So this is the trip that Mullah Hussein undertook from Mashhad to Babol, passing through 35 towns, 202 Babis. They left in July 1848, and they arrived at Babol on September 1848 after 83 days walking on foot. They only have 5 horses, and some people were elderly as well. And they walk 800 kilometers. Wow, 800 kilometers is a lot, isn't it? I don't think I can walk 800 kilometers. So it was a long walk, and this short video shows you the cities that he went. From Mashhad, he went to Nishapur. From Nishapur, he went to Sabzevar, a very dry area, Masenan, Majamay, then crossing the mountains, he went to Armejan. Look at the terrain, it's very dry. Bastan, Shahrud, then Dehmullah. These are very dry area, Mehmandast, and then Astane. Then he went to Chashmali. It's a beautiful place. There is a resort there. And then after Cheshmali, they went to Folad Mahale, and then Folad Mahale, they went north. They took a shortcut through Horijeh, Sona Seman, Fisku, Urim, and then you see the terrain is getting greener. They're approaching to Mazandaran. It's jungle, it's tropical climate, Sergei, and then finally you get to Babol, and then Babol finally to Sheikh Sea. So you can see from here, it's very dry, to here is very green. So they changed totally of climate. Also in that region, they spoke a different language. They were strangers in their own country. In the city of Arim, they stayed in Barfurush, in Urim, was 100 kilometers away from Barfurush, where the Babis who were staying there for a few days, probably resting from the long walk, they heard that Muhammad Shah has died. Now, why is that important? It's very important in Iran, because when the Shah died, everything in the country collapsed. When the Shah died, all the ministers, all the governors, all the authorities automatically lose their jobs. There's an empty of power in the region, in the central states, everywhere. There are fights in the royal court, in fights to choose a new Shah within the family, because in the Qajar dynasty is not like the European dynasty that the the eldest son, the eldest daughter becomes the successor, the new king. No, they were tribes that they had to decide, and there were a lot of infight. So when when a child dies, the roads are very dangerous. A lot of robbers, highwaymen, uh, till the new Shah comes up and appoint new authorities. So when the Shah dies, all the authorities go to the capital, to the funeral, to meet the new Shah and ask them for a job, asking for a position. So for this talk, the Babis proceeded to the city of Babol, was called Barfuruch before, where they were received with a lot of violence by the Seydol Olama, the main cleric. The Babis stay in this sort of inn, it's called Caravanserai. They were attacked, a number of Babis died, all incited by this cleric. All what they were looking is free passage. The Baha'is, they want all to keep moving. That was the only reason that they were asking for, right? But they were called as heretics. They say we are pilgrims. We want just to keep moving in our pilgrimage way. But they were rejected. They were attacked violently. Let's have a look at this short video.
Persia, a group of Bábis led by Mullah Hussein were severely harassed and some were murdered. Seeking to escape this persecution while observing the Bab's teaching of non-violence, the beleaguered Bábis petitioned the governor to provide safe passage out of town. The duplicitous governor agreed and sent a detachment of soldiers, but the Bábis had been deceived. The soldiers turned on them and started shooting.
So the Babis were
Persia,
offered free passage, but when they were leaving the province, they were attacked by this court. But the Babis managed to counterattack, and because they were in an area that they didn't know before. It's not like now that you know different parts of your country. At that time, people born and died in the same city. It was very hot. People spoke a different language. There was a lot of malaria because of the weather and so on. So at night, they ran away, of course, and they came across this abandoned shrine, which was called the name was the shrine of Sheikh Tabarsi. So they took refuge in that place to defend themselves from the army and from the clerics. Around the same time, on December 1848, the Shah wrote that the Babis were a French heresy, filthy and reprobate sect, that they should be suppressed at any price, because the fate of our religion and Shiite doctrines hangs in the balance. So he gave new power to the governor to suppress the Baha'is at all price. So this document still exists. So these are also pictures, all pictures of the shrine of Sheikh Tabarsi that may look like when the Babis reached that place. Inside there is the tomb of this saint, of this Muslim saint. And the Babis, just to protect themselves, they built a small fort, very rudimentary fort. They couldn't go forward because they realized that they couldn't move further because of the jungle. It was really jungle. The roads were not very clear. There were a lot of wild tribe in that area. They could be attacked anytime on the way out. So they decided to stay there till conditions became more favorable. But they want really to keep going, move out of the area. So I created this picture from using AI based on the description we have. Of course, it's not the actual picture, but you can see it was a fort surrounded. The Babis created a moat filled with water, and they live in huts inside this octagon, and they put some towers there, a main door. There were other doors, of course. So when surrounded by the government troops. This is a view now of the shrine, a new what it looked like now. So there were 8 battles that took place during this time from October 48 to May 1849. So the first battle was when 200 horsemen from a village came to attack them, October 1848. If you want to know more about the first battle, you can read it from the book, but I don't have time to do it now because it will take a lot of time. Then they organized a regional army formed by 12,000 tribal men, means people from the villages, peasants. They give them a uniform, they give them a gun, and some training, and they were to fight against the Bábis.
Battles were heroically fought in self-defense on the part of the Bábis, and for several heroic months, the Bábis withstood the onslaught of the forces that had gathered around them.
The Shah's troops, even though there were many times the number of the Bábis, much better armed than the Bábis, seemed unable to take this makeshift fort that had been created by the Bábis.
And you have Mullah Hussein, a famous scholar, you know.
Good. So they were surrounded, they were constantly being attacked. We know that Baha'u'llah visited the fort during the first week of October, 2 weeks after the arrival of the Bábis. He promised to come back, but he couldn't because at that time there was a strong siege on the fort by the army. Also, many Bábis from different parts of Iran, they traveled to help the defendants of the fort at the request of the Bab. We got also an important event is the arrival of Qudus to the fort. As we remember, he was in home arrest, house arrest, and he was released. He went to the fort on the same day that the new Shah was crowned. Nazarin Shah was crowned in the capital. The second battle took on the 22nd of October, 1848. There was a big crash between Bábis and the army. According to the records, they are not necessarily accurate, but the army lost about 175 to 400 people, while there was just one Bábi injured. There was already one army there, and then the Shah sent 2 more armies to the region. So that will be the third army. One was conducted by the Prince Governor, makes the Qoli Mirza, and from Tehran, he arrived in the middle of January 1849, and then the second army, also from the capital, the commander Abad Qoli Khan, arrived 3 days later, and together they made an army of 10,000 soldiers, more professional soldiers. And the first thing they did is they put a siege to the fort. So nobody can get in, nobody can get out of the fort, no food, no water, no provisions, no communication, total isolations. There was a third battle in the night of the 24th, 25th of January. We don't know how many Bábis were killed, but in the army, 70 soldiers plus 3 royal princesses. That was another win for the Bábis. The second and the third battle, the first, the second, and the third were big winners. The Bábis managed to defend themselves well. Again, they were not aggressing, they were just defending themselves. But in this third battle, the Qudus is injured, but he didn't die. There was also a fourth battle in the next month, in 2nd of February, that resulted in the death of Mullah Hussein, and 40 Bábis died, and the army lost 400 soldiers. The Bábis again were the winners in this battle, defending themselves. The army went in total disarray. The Bábis were very brave, but Mullah Hussein, who was one of the leaders, or probably the military leader of the Bábis, he died, and the army didn't know that Mullah Hussein died, because he knew that Mullah Hussein died. They thought that the Bábis, they finished their leadership. So the Bábis didn't tell anyone that Mullah Hussein died. And the army was very frustrated. They convened a war council. What can we do with the Bábis? Anything that works, we are more powerful, we have more guns, but nothing works. Unfortunately, the news that Mullah Hussein passed away went to the army, and there was a fifth battle when the Bábis also have to repel the aggressors. Nowruz, 1849, the Bábis celebrated Nowruz in the middle of the bombing. And there was another sixth battle, which was on the 30th of March. Well, every day they were being harassed with bombs, but talking about the main events. We don't know, probably there were no fatalities among the Bábis, but 39 soldiers took the enemy tower, which has been built just to with cannons to bomb the inside of the fortress. So the Bábis went up, they took over the fort, and the bombing in a way ceased. They destroyed also the tower. The Shah became very, very upset that all his best armies has been sent and they couldn't defeat these Bábis, which were untrained people. They were normal citizens. 1/3 of them were religious scholars, no training in the uses of war. So he sent the Shah, very upset. He said, saying, this general, Suleiman Hani Afshar, he was a very experienced general in wars, has been in several wars, and had the total confidence of the Shah. He was really tough, very cruel, very tough general. So he arrived with 5 regiments of infantry, 4 guns, and 6,000 cavalry. Imagine 6,000 cavalry. And what they did is that they tried new technologies, war technologies, this general. One of them was to, using a catapult, he was launching flammable projectiles to the inside the fort with a catapult. So that was devastating because they were burning the huts where Bábis used to live, and the structure of the fort, and they also put mines. He put mines in the doors of the fort to make the fort collapse. But the Bábis were very quickly fixing the doors and the walls. That happened on the 26th of April, just the beginning of and the 18 days that they were in the fort were very, very, very bad. They didn't have food. They had to eat the leather of the shoes. They only have water. They have to kill their horses and eat their horses. They have to unbury the horses dead and eat them. Even the meat was rotten. However, when the army started attacking, they just stood up and then went to defend the fort. But the hunger and the thirst for the last 18 days was really difficult, and they behaved like heroes. The last battle, was when the army tried to break into the fort. There was a face-to-face fighting. They managed to destroy the main door, but get into the fort, but they were repelled by the Bábis. So the prince governor was really worried about his reputation, because he was going to be dismissed by the Shah, is not putting under arrest because the Shah was they were tyrants. So unable to do anything, he put a plan. He said, let's talk about negotiations. We are going to give you, to the Bábis, free passage. We are going to give you money to go home. We are going to make you sit with the main clerics to discuss about religion. The passage was a deceptive exercise. He said, I'm going to sign on the Quran, which at that time was something very serious. You sign on the Quran, that I'm going to give you all security for your life. But that was just a trap, a trip, because once they leave to the village of Afra, which was only 800 meters away from the fort, they said they came in the afternoon that day and said, go and rest tomorrow morning. We're going to give you a good breakfast, a banquet, a good breakfast. So they went to the breakfast the next day, but they were asked to, the army came with their guns and forced them to disarm, give away their arms, and they were attacked without any mercy while they were having their breakfast. Have a look at this video.
It was only out of a scheme that the commanders plotted that they were able to subdue the Bábis. They swore on the Quran that they would not harm the Bábis were they to surrender.
The Bábis realized it was a trick, but surrendered anyway out of reverence for the Quran.
The commander attacked them, killed many of them and captured other ones, and all the ones that were captured were also eventually put to death.
So that took place on the 10th of May, 1849. According to the testimony of Sheikh Effendi, they were assembled in the camp of the enemy, were stripped of their possessions, sold as slaves, the rest being either killed by the spears and swords of the officers or torn asunder, or bound to trees and riddled with bullets, or blown from the mouths of cannon and consigned to the flames, or else being disemboweled and having their heads impaled on a spear and lances. One of the historians said, so much of their blood was collected in a hollow of the ground, that the truth of a tradition which affirms that in the land shall be such bloodshed that a horse shall wade knee-deep in gore was made manifest. Those who were survived, they were killed while fleeing. They were impaled, was a typical practice in the Iranian society. The person is laid down and stuck his nail into his chest, blown from cannons. It was a normal, typical practice among the Iranian society. And they were smeared with naphtha and burned alive. And their stomachs were cut open. And when they cut open their stomachs, they saw in their stomachs still the roots, the grass that they were eating in the finally, the fort was totally destroyed. All the defenses were destroyed by the army. And a few of them were sold as slaves, were taken about eight people, were taken to the city of Barfurush, Babol, especially Qudus. And the people who survived this sort of people who were sold as slaves, right later they wrote their memories. They wrote the story of the whole fort. So they were eyewitnesses. Therefore, the Qudus was taken to this mosque where he was trial. And after the trial, that of course it was a joke. was nothing serious. He was
Stripped of
killed.
his clothes and chained, he was paraded through the streets in an eerie reenactment of the Passion of the Christ. The howling mob shouted curses and spat upon him. Finally, his body was pierced, mutilated, and burned.
So what was the end of Qutuz? So what were the consequences of the Sheikh Tabarsi? First of all, the trial of Qutuz. It was the first formal court that during 3 days, court case that was trial for 3 days, where the state authority, means the prince, which was the nephew of the Shah, the uncle of the Shah, conducted against a follower about for 3 days in presence of the clerics. Before, the Bábis were just killed. This was the first time that the trial was conducted formally. That was also the beginning of a number of systematic persecutions of the faith of the Bab organized by the government. For example, the revolt of Sanjan, about 2,000 people died, women, children, adults. That was in 1850, and also in 1850, the revolt of Nairis, with many people were also killed. Another consequence is that half of the letter of the living, the 18 letter of the living, the first disciples of the Bab were killed, meaning there was a significant loss to the Babi leadership. The Bab himself was executed in 9th of July, 1850, in the city of Tabriz. There were many more persecutions, martyrdoms since then until now. In a good outcome, the Baha'i faith emerged from obscurity nationally because people start talking about the Qaim. The Qaim have appeared, and the rate of conversion start to increase significantly, although we cannot ascertain the real numbers. Some people say 100,000 because the Babis kept the identity confidential, because if they knew they were Babis, they were killed. But the faith started spreading nationally and internationally. The French, the British, the Russian embassies informed their governments about this butchery, this massacre to their governments. Even went to international newspapers like the Journal of Constantinople, was written in French, where this journal was documenting and writing about the development of the Sheikh Tabarsi conflict. Also, very importantly, it was the first time that the clerical order and its absolute supremacy were openly challenged by the faith of the Bab. So nobody dared to challenge the clerical order because they will be killed. But the faith of the Bab was the first movement that challenged, and that causes a movement an attitude on the society that discussing, critiquing was something that is possible to do. That it's possible to be critical of critical order. Is totally possible to be critical of the say the corruption of the governments. So little by little, this sort of movement tendency start to grow across the Iranian society. Some misconceptions also took place. They say that the Babis have an ownership of women, collective ownership of women. That was spread by the Saidor Ulama. But the issue is that there were no women in the Sheikh Tabarsi, they were all men, right? They were accused of anything possible. They were even accused of being cannibalism. Socialist allegations, the comments that the Babis were communists because they have suppressed the private property. But however, the Bab never suppressed private property. He even said that if you enter a house in the absence of the owner, there should be a penalty for any offender. So they had no basis for these socialist communist allegations. They were accused, for example, when they arrived to the Sheikh Tabarsi fort for the first time, they put all the belongings in one single location, that they were going to share all their possessions, whatever they brought to the fort. Of course, it was logical. They were there to survive. So there was no difference of disagreement. They cook, they have one kitchen for everyone, for example. But it doesn't mean that this is communism or socialism. Also, they were accused of conspiring against the government by the ulama. The prince, with a bit of intelligence, sent a emissary, messenger to Qudus in the fort, asking them, are you political or religious? And Qudus wrote to the prince, our dispute only concerns relations. We are not here to damage the government. We just want to free passage, and we want to discuss with the cleric about the truth of the religious teachings. And that's the entrance. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Handel. Please join me in thanking him for presenting this evidence-based, thoroughly researched and authentic account of the Bábi Massacre of 1849 in Iran. To conclude, I would like to go through major highlights of the talk prior to the Q&A part of the meeting. Professor Handel has shown with detailed analysis and many relevant pictorial depicts that Babism presented a step toward modernity in the development of Iran. Although the ministry of the Bab lasted only 6 years, its influence extended well into the second half of the 19th century. In particular, Babism confronted both the corrupt clerical establishment and the tyranny of the Qajar dynasty. Such a defiant stance was perceived by the population as a grave taboo, since it often meant imprisonment or death. The Bab's teachings were certainly revolutionary for his time. They were very wide in scope. Many of those principles have been adopted nowadays, particularly the emancipation of women and the pursuit of universal knowledge. Yet, the many social contradictions in the Qajar society and the governance saw those teachings as a threat rather than empowerment agency. Babism represented a powerful current of religious ferment that anticipated profound social and political upheavals in the 19th century Iran. The message was imbued with a strong millenarian expectation, proclaiming the imminent advent of a new spiritual and moral order. At the same time, Babism assumed the character of a broadly based popular movement, drawing significantly support from peasants, artisans, and other marginalized social groups. Beyond its doctrinal claims, the movement gained sympathy because of its open opposition to an unpopular state apparatus and a deeply resented Orthodox clergy, thereby embodying both spiritual renewal and social protest. The story told by Professor Handel shows that the movement and defining features of a prophetic manifestation have repeatedly manifested throughout religious history. Those emerging from Judaism recall the oppression of the Hebrew people and the trials of Abraham and Moses. Christians recognize parallels in the act of the apostles, the martyrdom of Saint Stephen, the tireless journeys of Paul, and the early persecution and the Rome. Islam too remembers similar tribulation in the life of Arabian prophet Muhammad. In this recurring pattern, the apostolic phase of great religious system have invariably demanded sacrifice from devoted believers facing entrenched opposition. The Bábi religions likewise extremely exemplified this enduring law, having borne intense persecution to affirm their claims and spiritual mission. In particular, the massacre of Sheikh Tabarsi showed refusal to change the views of the state and the clergy to provide a peaceful solution to the deadlock as requested by the Bábis. The incident could have been resolved with a gentle disposition to talk to the four defendants who in numerous times asserted the non-political character of their faith and the request for free passage being strangers in an alien environment. The root cause of this inflexibility was no other than religious prejudice, a serious problem that Iran has suffered in the past few centuries, which has been augmented in the last decades. Once again, thank you very much, dear Professor Handel, for the insight, accurate account, and really enlightening us into the details of this massacre, which I'm sure will be informative and some lessons, in the history of our vast country can be taken, and probably in the future, hopefully, we are really always hopeful that the prejudice and intolerance are removed and history really opens the golden chapters that everyone and the future will remember and embrace. So now I open the space for
Sorry,
question and answers.
excuse me, Suruchan, with your
Befand.
permission, unfortunately, we have run out of time, so
Sure.
therefore we can possibly have only very short few minutes, the 5 to 10 minutes for questions, because we are over time. Sorry
Well,
about
thank
that.
you very much for mentioning that. But I think this conversation and presentation was so,
Yes,
attractive and interesting to all of us to listen. And my apologies if I didn't interject it. I was all absorbed in this story
yes,
and this history. So my apologies for that. But thank you for mentioning that.
it's okay.
So if there are any questions in the remaining short period of time, please ask, and Professor Handel would be happy to answer. Maybe to break the silence in the next few minutes, if you allow me, maybe I ask Professor Handel a question that Muslims believe that Muhammad is the seal of the prophets. And maybe this interpretation or this belief has blocked the way to interdialogue or prejudice. And we want to know, how does the Bab interpret this statement, seal of the prophet? And if you don't mind, maybe shortly discuss that one for us.
I don't remember that that the Bab explained directly the term seal of the prophet. Need to think about it. But in general, there are two different interpretations that has come up on that issue. One of them is that at the time of Prophet Muhammad in Mecca, there were many other people claiming to be prophets. So he was not the only one. There were several. If you look into the literature that were claiming in the Arabia to be prophets. So when Muhammad says that I am the seal of the prophet, he's trying to say I am the real prophet, I am the seal, the official stamp prophet. That's one interpretation. That he's the only one prophet amongst the other ones. Another interpretation is that the word seal of the prophet, in any language means the final. It's just evidence. We all know really, if we go just back about 50 years ago in our countries, everyone have stamp, right? All official documents stamp, meaning that's official. So it means that he was an official prophet, but we never say it's the end. In no language, seal means that means that as the end. Likewise, Jesus Christ is called the Son of God, but he's not the biological Son of God. It means a relationship with God was so close, like father and son. Or Abraham is considered the friend of God. That doesn't mean he's a friend that you hug around. It means a spiritual meaning that they were very close, like friends. Or that Moses spoke to God, right? The speaker. It doesn't mean that he spoke physically. He cannot spoke physically with God like we are talking now through Zoom. Means is a spiritual, mystical meaning. The same for the seal of the prophet. Is just repeating something that actually the Baha'u'llah explained in the Kitab Began is that if seal means the end, he said in the word of God, the first is the last, and the last is the first. There is no distinctions among the prophets. So he said, for example, if Jesus says, I am the first, I am the last. Actually, Jesus Christ says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. No, we know that the first prophet was Adam, is it? But he said, in the word of God, there is no difference among the prophets. So if someone said, I am the last, but also the end is totally right in that sense.
Thank you very much. Is there, friends, any other questions that you wish to ask in the minutes remaining? I think Mr. Haddadan put hands up. Is it right?
Yeah, it's not so much as the questions as just to highlight the responsibility of our dear Boris as a historian who is writing books about the faith, is that the dispensation of Baha'u'llah is different from other dispensations. What happens that previously in the history we would only purely mention ontological aspects of religions in different eras. But Baha'u'llah's one is different because not only the history to a certain degree, dear Boris included that, but it was mentioning it since our young Baha'is in the future and our Baha'i generations and also outsiders who are doing referring to these books, historical books, to do investigation of the truth, they should also refer, as they call it, underlying the rationality of the history. Because Hegel, a philosopher, he says that we must bring along not only the history, what happened at the time, also the as in Iranian is aql tarikh also should be highlighted. So the historian explains rationally. In the case of these eras, Baha'u'llah's dispensation, also epistemologically, also methodologically, and also rationality of what has happened on those days, so that the reader knows what the intention of the Bab was, or his followers was, not just to establish some religious aspect which just going to replace what was previously announced, not only along Abrahamic revelations, also worldwide, also Eastern histories, religions, and also, since it is for the cause of unity in diversity, has also reasons behind it, logicality of it, and methodological ways that we could enter. Thanks.
Of course. Thank you very much for your comments and observation. True. Anything else? Masood Jan, if you allow us, we exceeded the time, and I hand over to you for the
Thank you.
closing session. I don't know the procedure, so please forgive me. I don't know how to proceed with the closer, and it's hand it to you for that.
Sure. Thank you very much. And it has been a very wonderful occasion, and we were basically spellbound by the account that Professor Handel presented so ably, for this. And of course, it shows that, this topic is quite vast and requires a lot more meditation and consideration and a study of the history of the Bábi and Baha'i religion. And but obviously, this presentation has given us a guideline of how to more deeply have an understanding of the Bábi movement and the rest of the progress of that to the Baha'i religion. And thank you very much for all the participants who came and took part in this, and I'm sure we benefited tremendously. And of course, I would advise that you refer to the publications of Professor Handel, that a couple of them you see on the website, the poster, which are relevant basically to the discussion tonight. And also he has got many others that you can refer to and follow that. Thank you very much, all of you, and I bid my farewell and best wishes to all of you. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.